the people that brought you InGoal Magazine, this is InGoal Radio, the podcast, presented by The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeysHop.com. And we are on the air with episode 17. Hello, goalies, parents, coaches, and for those who are just interested in good quality hockey content, or those that are just trolling. I'm Darren Millard, your host of InGoal Radio, the podcast. Today, we continue our look ahead to Tendy Fest, the gathering of goaltenders at Burnaby 8 rinks at the end of the month, May 26th to be specific. You can try, test, talk, listen, shop, and more, all in a dedicated world about goaltending. Our gear segment today sends Kevin Woodley to Source for Sports Surrey and a conversation with Cam about the Bauer 2X line. That's one level below the Pro line, a second price point, officially launched on May 17th. Our feature interview is an extended chat with two-time Olympian, 3 if you count his time in the management role, a man that spent almost 20 years standing in front of an NHL net, Sean Burke, who accepts a flurry of questions in the same manner that he played goal. He was solid, opinionated, steady, and on more than one occasion, spectacular. He doesn't shy away from any of our queries. That conversation after we welcome in the co-founder of InGoal, Kevin Woodley. Kev?
Thanks, Darren. Big show today. Big show. I'm really excited about this one. Sean Burke was one of my favorite guys to talk to him when he was playing, and that hasn't changed now that he's moved on into scouting and hopefully in the management side soon. One of the good guys and just a guy who is easy to talk to and loves goaltending. But before we get there, so I'm excited for it, but before we get there, I think we got to thank the people that make it possible. And that is Chad Purdy and his crew at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports here in Surrey. It's where I've been going for all my goaltending needs. Actually, to be honest, predating my time with InGoal Magazine. This is where I went to buy my first sets of equipment, my first set of skates, my first mask, because the guys there know what they're talking about. This isn't just guys pulled off the street to work in a sports store. These are goalies, fellow goaltenders that know the game, live the game, love the game. And for anybody that does all those things, they know that gear is an important part of it. And these guys get that. They've got a great selection. The latest lines from CCM, Bauer, Bryans, Vaughn, Warrior, you name it, they've got it in there, as well as a lot of great accessories. We've gone over those past couple of weeks. I'm excited to go over the Bauer 2X line this week with Cam in our weekly gear segment. Great sharpening from Cecil and his crew. They're always keeping me with a fresh edge. So that's why I go to the Hockey Shop Source for Sports in Surrey. If you can't get there in person, if you're listening from abroad, and we know a lot of you have reached out and touched base with them online, that's thehockeysHop.com. They've got great service there online. You can ask questions through them and get answers there. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the Hockey Shop Source for Sports in Surrey, thehockeysHop.com. For making this possible, for giving us the opportunity to bring interviews like this one with Sean Burke we're going to run to you goaltenders around the world.
Woody, thank you. If you're wondering, David Hutchison, the other co-founder of InGoal Magazine, is in Montreal doing some off-air work for InGoal, leaving Woody and me to take care of the production. How will this turn out? Sean Burke is our guest, someone who is on track to become an NHL general manager. He's mentioned seemingly every time there's an opening these days. But in working backwards, he was also a top-of-the-mountain goalie coach in Arizona, had some really, really key roles in some of the best goaltenders to come out of Arizona in the Western Conference the last few years. That role as goalie coach followed a great career scattered around Hartford and Carolina, which is really one stop if you think about it. Jersey, Philadelphia, Tampa, played in Arizona, Los Angeles, Vancouver, as well as Florida. 800-plus games played. Burke topped 300 NHL victories. He was fiery. And one of my favorite parts about Sean Burke's approach is Burke refused to be just a goalie. And what I mean by that is he opted to be a full member of the team. He led, he coached, he mentored, and when it required, he kicked butt. He didn't just sit in the corner and play that role that some people feel goalies should play. Here is Sean Burke on InGoal Radio, the podcast. The playing career internationally and in the National Hockey League has a lot to cover, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first up, post-playing days. give us an idea of where you're at, the 401 on post-playing for Sean Burke.
Yeah, well, I'll go to the background. I've spent the last 3 years part of the Montreal Canadiens organization scouting for them, but I've also done a lot of Hockey Canada things, including the Olympics, a couple Spengler Cups, the World Championships. So it's been a real good 3 years. A lot of experiences, very educational, getting an opportunity to work with some great people, and I think it was the kind of year or years that I needed to sort of add to my experience and my resume.
You come off playing and you become a goalie coach, and you were really good at it, Sean. Really made a name for yourself, and you've decided to move on and be part of management groups and be a general manager internationally. There's other people like Bill Ranford, for instance, with the Los Angeles Kings, and his situation where he doesn't want to move up. He's very happy being a goalie coach. So just curious where you find yourself in the mix between being at the top of your field as a goalie coach and then trying to pursue other opportunities.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Billy was my goalie coach in LA at the end of my career. And, there's guys like Billy who are really, really good at what they do. They enjoy not only the coaching, they enjoy the schedule of it. You really, as a coach, get a lot of your summer off. It's more of a similar schedule to when you played. And guys like Billy who have so much to offer, it's why they're so good at their job. They've got experience, but they've also they can help players with the mental side of the game. For me, I enjoyed coaching. It was never a question not enjoying it. But I started out after I retired in sort of management. I went into development right away, and I ended up coaching really because Don Maloney had come to me and just asked if we had Brizdolov. We had just signed him, and Don thought that there'd be a good fit there, and so I took it on, but never really taking my eye off the management side of things. And that was the deal I had in Arizona, was that even when I was coaching, I was part of everything else that went on in the summer, the drafting, free agency, and all those areas. So, coaching was something I really enjoy, and I still enjoy. I got on the ice the last couple of years when I was the GM with the Olympic team. I got on the ice with the goalies sometimes. I went out there. I don't think you have to totally go away from it, but obviously, for me personally, I wanted to expand and go into some other areas.
Well, I talked to some of those goalies actually, and I can tell you how much they enjoyed that experience being on the ice with you. One question before we kind of switch to stopping pucks and how you got started. We see so many guys, Sean, that have success. We run into, whether it's CEOs, corporations, all kinds of different fields that started in goaltending. A lot of times they talk about sort of the lessons or the life of a goalie, sort of planting the seeds for success in other areas outside of just being around hockey all the time. Are there aspects of goaltending that you think help make you, well suited for this side of things, switching over?
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, I don't know if there's a position in our game where you get an opportunity to be in the middle of the action, but you also get to observe from an area and a position and nobody else, a vantage point nobody else has. I mean, I guess I liken it to if you watch, hockey 82 games a year from behind the glass, right behind the net, you would really see a lot of things that nobody else gets to see. And you do that over the course of 20 years or so. You've seen a lot of hockey. You start to, I hope at some point, understand what a good player looks like and how the game really works. And so that's an obvious advantage. It's just that position lends itself to you being able to observe like nobody else really can. But it's also a leadership position. I mean, goaltending generally never gets the credit for being a leadership position, but everybody will tell you, and I think it's proven to be true over and over again, it's the most impactful position on a team. Just watch the playoffs right now. Watch, obviously, everything leading up to the playoffs. So much of it comes down to goaltending, and it takes a leadership mentality, not necessarily a vocal one or a guy that leads by the same way that maybe your captain does. But I think all those things you learn along the way from that position can help you in other areas of life, and definitely help you as you move out of the game as a player and into other areas.
Would you like to see more goaltenders be visibly vocal or just outwardly vocal on the ice the way you were?
Well, not really. I think it's such an individual position too, and there's no one size fits all. I mean, I was very fortunate to play against and with a lot of the great goaltenders, and everybody was a little different in their own way. Even if it was just playing with a couple guys at All-Star games, Patrick Bauer, Marty Brodeur, and seeing their demeanor and the way they handled themselves. And I played with Hextall in Philadelphia, who a very intense guy on the ice, but very, very kind of calm and quiet off the ice. And so my attitude on goaltending was always that your best way of leading from that position is by example. You can go out there and really have a huge impact on the game, but if you get distracted and you're too vocal and you start to get wrapped up in too many other things, it's probably going to take away from your main job, which is stopping the puck. And I think there is a way that you can combine that, and I think the great goaltenders always have. And if you look at the guys I just mentioned, not only were they top players in the league, the Dominic Hastiks as well, and those sort of players, but they were leaders on their team. And it wasn't them wearing a C on their jersey that made them a leader. It was the way they competed every night, and also the intensity they brought to their teams.
We saw the C on the jersey, or I guess on the mask, sort of not work out here in Vancouver with Roberto Luongo, Sean. I don't think a lot of people realize, but you had an opportunity to be a captain as a goaltender long before that. Is it all the things you just talked about? Is that why you turned down Hartford when they asked you to wear a C?
Well, I never really turned it down. I think that at that time, I remember it was Paul Holmgren, came to me and wanted to know what my feelings are on that. And I just really felt that it's not something at that position that you need to demonstrate with a letter on your jersey. The other side of it is the practical side of it. You're not going to be on the ice every night. You're not going to play 82 games. So, wearing a C and sitting on the bench really doesn't have the same effect anyway. But I also felt that leadership is a group thing. I mean, there's been great captains in our game, guys that I've played with, the Mark Messiers, and I played with Pat Verbeek for a long time, Kirk Muller. But all those guys also have a good supporting cast around them and lead by committee. So I always felt that if I was that guy that was considered a leader, I could be part of a leadership group and not have to be front and center. It wasn't where I thought I'd be most effective.
One thing that always bugged me when I was around the broadcast industry, you'd be watching a game and a goaltender would do something a little different, and you'd hear the chimes, just stop the puck. Were you ever told that, like that kind of thing?
So many times in my career. Well, earlier on, when I was younger and maybe a little more fiery, practices were different back then. Guys competed a little differently, and as a goaltender, there's nothing more frustrating than getting scored on. And in practice, you get scored on a lot. So I was frustrated a lot of the time, and many times you bark at your teammates, and a guy shoots high, or he comes down and holds on to the puck too long. And I think every guy has experienced that if you've ever played the position for any length of time. And that was the standard comeback from a forward or a defenseman, which really got under your skin, because they're right. Just stop the puck always seemed to anger you, but really at the end of the day, that is the job of the goaltender.
Sean Burke's chatting with us on InGoal Radio, the podcast, chatting about his memories of playing the goal and his experiences. Let's start with your journey. Why did you start the position?
Yeah, it was really kind of, I just sort of fell into it as a kid. I remember my dad, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, suggesting that I play goal. And I thought, I like the fact that I'd be on the ice the whole time. I don't have to come off. And he started working with me as a kid. He'd take me over to the schoolyard across the street, and I'd put on a pair of goalie gloves, and he'd fire some pucks at me. And I didn't have any equipment on other than gloves and a stick. And trust me, I learned in a hurry how to catch pucks, because if you didn't, they were going to hit you. So it really just happened to be my dad that pushed me sort of in that direction. And as you get moving along, I realized I had a little bit of ability. I enjoyed the competing side of it, and I was very lucky in those days. Unlike it is now, I think, playing hockey was a winter sport, and I did a lot of other things and played baseball in the summer and all kinds of other sports, and just really developed as an athlete more than anything, which I think later on was probably one of my biggest assets, was that I was athletic and was able to learn the nuances of that position, but it was all based in athleticism.
At what point did a goalie coach enter the equation for you? We've seen it become so prominent from such a young age these days, Sean, and obviously a role you served in successfully right up to the NHL. But when for you did that become part of the equation? Because it was kind of a different generation there. There weren't a lot of goalie coaches in the NHL, or they were all sort of, been there, done that. Here's how I handled it advice guys.
Yeah, there was no goalie coaching at a young age for me. Like I said, my dad was my goalie coach, and he never played the position, but he understood sports, and he understood, that he used to say to me, hey, if you're going to, I never forget, he used to say it over and over, if you're going to do something, do it right. And, his I guess what he was really saying was what everybody knows is that, hey, if you're going to take the time to play, give an effort and go out there and compete and give it your best shot. But really, formal goalie coaching for me never really began until I played junior hockey, and even then I was with the Toronto Marlies, and we didn't have a full-time goalie coach, but I was really lucky to have Johnny Bauer, who at that time was around the Leafs, and he would come and watch the odd practice and just sit on the bench, and I'd skate over, and he'd give me a few tips. And that was, and I didn't even, as a young player, didn't even recognize what an honor and how lucky I was. I knew, of course, who he was and what his legacy had been. But looking back, what a great guy to be your first, I guess, official goalie coach, if you want to call it that. And then as I moved on to the Olympic team, the national team with Dave King was the first time we really had a full-time goalie coach, and his name was Dale Henwood. And Dale was not an established goalie or anybody that had a career, but he was just a guy that was there every day, watching, observing, giving you little tips. And boy, what a difference I learned in a hurry that makes, just to have somebody that can focus on your position. And so from then on, obviously, on to the NHL, and I was very lucky. I had, Benoit Allaire for a long time. I had Billy Smith. I had Reggie Lemelin. I had a goalie coach everywhere I went after that, but it really helped me when I went into coaching too, to be able to take all the little things I learned from different guys and sort of mold it into what my philosophy was.
Word for word will be impossible, but those exchanges with Johnny Bauer, can you pass along any of that to us?
It's funny. I don't remember specifically, other than I remember thinking when I was younger, my dad's pretty smart, because Johnny Bauer's saying a lot of the same things my dad was saying, and he never played. but again, I think it was the time and the era was, looking back, and I've watched obviously videos of the old days, and you see a game every once in a while, and you realize the one thing that's never changed in our game, and the one thing that's never changed at that position, it's still probably the most important thing, and that's competing. And, the game sometimes has morphed into a more technical side, and obviously there's a lot of things that I worked on as I got older to help me in that area. But ultimately, those guys back in that generation, they looked at the game as you get out there and you compete, and you do whatever you have to do to stop the puck. And really, I was lucky that that's sort of what my base was in. I never was over technical. I never got over coached. And a guy like Mr. Bauer recognized from when I was young in junior hockey that I had some athleticism. And so a lot of his talks that I remember were just based around competing and going out there and, reading the play and observing the rush and watching those kind of things, and then just competing to stop the puck. So that still, to me, till this day, is when you look at the guys who are playing in these playoffs and the NHL goalies, how good they are now. It still comes down to, at the end of the day, the guys who go out there and compete.
You were unusually tall when you left junior. Were you ever told that you were too big to be a goaltender, that you should try another position?
No, not really. I think that, again, I never can really say, looking back, that I was ever discouraged by anybody. I was very lucky. Anybody that I ever came across that was a coach of mine or that was somebody that was in the game, they were always pretty positive, and nobody ever took me aside and tried to, make me feel like, hey, I wasn't going to make it.
No, but you were bigger than some of your defensemen, or most of your defensemen at times.
Well, the only disadvantage to that was we didn't have the toughest team in junior, and so I was the guy sometimes that would get run behind the net, and I had to fight every once in a while. And, I can remember some of my defensemen saying to me before we'd start a game, "Hey, don't start anything tonight." And I was like, "Oh boy." Yeah, just stop the puck. But no, I think that again, athleticism, size, those are never a disadvantage. Obviously, in those days, goalies in general were smaller. I grew up watching Mike Palmateer, Doug Favell, Rogie Vachon, of course. But there was Ken Dryden. He was in the league, and he was a guy that I watched a lot when I was a kid. So it wasn't as if there weren't those kind of guys playing the game in those days.
The Devils pick you in 85, World Juniors in 86, Olympics in 88. Is there one that stands out among those three big moments leading up to your pro career? What are your memories of the 88 Olympics? What are the ones that stand out most?
Just obviously the competition that we were playing in those days. The Russian team was still made up of the Big Red Army, the Big Red Machine. I mean, I think that if you go back and look at those lineups, to be a young player that had never played in the NHL at that point, but yet was playing against the Fetisovs and the Makarovs and those players. And the other teams, the Czech team, they had still their great players. So I think as a young player, the sort of indoctrination that I got into the NHL, I came from playing against some of the best competition in the world before I ever got to the NHL, and that was a real fortunate experience for me. One where I look back, Max McNabb, when he drafted me, was a very good general manager in recognizing that development was a huge part of young players, and so he sent me off to the national team with Dave King, and I got a great development path that for me was the biggest reason I was able to have an NHL career.
It's goofy, but one of the things that I remember about that Olympic Games was Andy Moog joined the team late, and you guys were the partners, but they had some kind of rule about helmets or masks, and you guys had to change your cages right before the tournament. Andy wore the bubble with the eye tech, and you wore the cage, right?
Yeah, no, it was really strange. The IIHF, of course, the Olympics is an IIHF tournament, and their rules for the goalie masks were different. You weren't allowed to have the normal cage with the bigger eye holes. And we didn't find that out until we got to basically the Olympic Games. So yeah, we both had to change, and Andy Moog wore the strangest combination I think I've ever seen up till now, where he had a visor and a helmet and part of a cage, and it was all put together, and you had to worry about it fogging up and all those kind of things. I just went with the old standard cage, which still was an adjustment because I had been wearing a different one, but yeah, that was another little added excitement to the whole tournament.
Did you freak out at all?
What's that? Sorry.
Did you freak out at all? Did you say, like, what the hell are we doing this? Why are we only finding out about this now?
I didn't say too much in those days. I was just excited to be there. I was like a kid in a candy store. I was getting to play in the Olympic Games. They could have told me to go out there with no mask on, and I think I would have done it.
That reminds me of Luongo here in Vancouver in 2010. I mean, all these years later, it was hard to believe it could still happen, but he broke in gloves with a one-piece cuff, and back then the IHF rules dictated you had to have a two-piece cuff, and he had to switch. So it still happens, a little bit of differences between NHL and international rules. I'll transition to the gear a little bit, Sean, before we get into your pro career, but how much of a role did that play, in wanting to play the position? For some guys that the gear's, a fascinating element of it. Was it for you growing up? And the other thing we've talked about over the years that I wanted to ask you about, when did the fear factor disappear for goalies? Because you played during that era where it went from getting hurt and feeling all those pucks really started to not be a factor anymore. Was that part of your career going through that transition?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I would never, categorize myself as a gearhead. I mean, as a kid, I remember being over in the schoolyard and painting my mask. In those days, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Broad Street Bullies were a favorite team of mine. So I can remember taking I think I got it at Canadian Tire, a little mask over the schoolyard and painting half of it black and half of it orange. I thought that was the coolest thing. I had a Philadelphia Flyer mask now, and so equipment's always been a fascination for young goalies. I think it really does attract you to the position. It's one of the first things that I think attracts young players to want to be goalies. I can remember one of the best Christmas presents I ever got was I was around 10 years old, and my dad got me a pair of Vladislav Tretiak gloves, a catcher and a blocker, and I don't know to this day if I've ever seen them anywhere else. I may have had the only pair in Canada. I don't know where he got them, but they were the coolest thing, and obviously I never took them off for the most part. But ironically, all these years later, I'm on an IHF committee, and Vladislav Tretiak is the chair of our committee. So it's funny how the game, you move along in it and some of the experiences you have, but equipment for me was something that, definitely attracted me to the position.
How much did it change the game as it evolved from a protection level? Like as a guy playing it at the time, growing up where you felt those pucks, like how much of an impact do you think it had on the style we see now that goalies, for the most part, don't have to worry about that anymore?
Oh, it has a huge impact. Obviously the position and when I started out, equipment was there to protect you, and really that's all you ever thought of it in terms of, and it wasn't that protective at times. I can remember coming out of junior, that was probably the last time that I ever wore two-piece upper body, where your arm protection and your chest protection were two different pieces, and so you didn't have your elbows, your shoulder caps, everything was protected, but not to the degree that if you took a shot, you weren't going to feel it. And so you just caught more pucks. You didn't block. You didn't go down into a butterfly position until you had to. And so it really has changed the position. And yet it has to, because the shooting and the sticks and the one-piece sticks have all made everybody a better and a harder shooter. So at the end of the day, the equipment has still evolved in terms of having to protect players, but it really does change the way the position has been played, because there's not the same fear anymore, for sure.
I'm surprised to hear that you're not a gearhead, because you were one of the guys that had always, I can always remember having the colored gear and the matching gear, one of the first ones.
Yeah, I liked it to look good. I wanted there to be something that made sense about it, that I didn't want to look like a guy. I mean, I think part of that was probably that I grew up playing with used pieces of equipment. I never had a new pair of pads as a kid. I got those gloves, as I mentioned, and I'm sure in those days it was a huge investment for my family to have to come up with the money to buy those. So I never was that kid that was out there with the greatest equipment or the latest. So when I got to the point where somebody else was paying for it, yeah, hell yeah, I was going to have the best I could have, and it was gonna match, because that was the first chance I had to actually look good out there.
Any favorite sets over the years? Because I think, like, when we saw Carolina go to the Hartford jerseys this year, we sure saw a lot of pictures of your Whaler setups on the internet.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed the whale sail. That was a great look. I don't even remember who came up with that concept. I was wearing Brian's equipment for most of my career, and so those were designs that somewhere in the little Brian's factory in Kingsville, Ontario, somebody was sitting there, came up with some ideas, and they used to always just kind of run them by me. And most of the time I was like, yeah, that looks great. Let's go with that. But as far as just as years went by, I think I always wanted the equipment to not sort of stand out in a way that it took away or it was distracting. But I always felt there was also a way that you could sort of make it and a little bit an advantage. If a shooter came in and he saw more white in your pads, he may think that was open net, and just little things like that you started to think about playing some head games that maybe could help you with shooters.
So did you ever do studies or any real research on that, or was that just talking to guys and getting their feedback on what they see when they come down?
Yeah, it was more just observing. I think that what a lot of people probably don't recognize with goaltending sometimes is that every goaltender really wants to be a forward. None of us really want to be goaltenders. We all want to be forwards. So every chance we ever got to go out and play shinny or scrimmage or get out after practice and shoot some pucks, that really is what every goaltender really enjoys. So you just observe all the time, and you're always looking. And I was always watching the other gear that guys were wearing, and when I get out after practice once in a while and maybe shoot a few pucks around, certain things would kind of jump out at me, and you'd always kind of look and go, well, that guy's wearing white equipment. He just looks a lot bigger. And then you'd see a guy wear black pads. You thought, those look small. I don't want to look like that in the net. So most of it just came from observing. But quite honestly, I never really was a guy that went home and spent a lot of time worrying about my equipment. I just wanted it to feel good. And I sweat like nobody else. So I would go through, I think one season I went through 15 pair of gloves. And I would break my equipment down so quick because of how much I sweat. And thank goodness I wasn't paying for my own equipment in my career. I would have come out owing money.
That career starts in New Jersey. You talked about it already, Sean, how much those Olympics prepared you for that run. But as it went on, 11 games at the end of that season and right into the playoffs. I think you went in OT in the final game of the regular season to get the Devils into the playoffs for the first time ever. Like, could you have imagined a better start? Could you have drawn it up any better than that?
No, obviously not. I mean, I never went into New Jersey with anything in mind other than just trying to prove I was an NHL player at that point. And I think that Olympic experience was really the only reason that I had any kind of confidence going into New Jersey. I had been a second-round draft pick, and there was, some thought that the team was, anticipating me coming in. They felt that I was a guy that was a good prospect. But, as a player yourself, you're going to the NHL. This is what you've dreamed of your whole life. You have no idea how you're going to fit in or how you're going to do. But I did feel that after the Olympics and playing against all those teams over the year, that I was ready. I was as ready as I was going to be. And I was lucky too. I went in there. I had a coach in Jim Schoenfeld that even when I didn't start out great, I mean, my first NHL win was a 7-6 overtime in the Boston Garden. I didn't exactly stand on my head. But there was a confidence that I felt from the organization. So, and from the players, we had a good young team. So it really went better than I would have ever expected. And in hindsight, that was great, but it also didn't help me for the next couple of years because I really took a step back after that. And it was hard to recreate the emotion of an Olympic year and all the stuff that happened in Jersey. And then I was into what everybody knows is a long season, and for the next couple of years, I struggled.
Sean, you were in that overtime game to put your team into the playoffs for the first time. The goalie at the other end, could you believe that you weren't lighting that guy up?
Darren Pang. Well, I can't believe it now when I see the size of him. I think he's got smaller somehow.
I think he's shrunk too. Yeah.
But there's a great example of, I think, what I was talking about maybe earlier, that Darren Pang was an incredibly competitive guy, and to play goal he'll list himself at 5'5". I'm not even sure he's 5'5", but he was just, he was a guy that found a way to have a career because he competed. And looking back, I never really thought much about the guy in the other end, other than you knew nights when you were playing against, Patrick Waugh and Eddie Belfour and some of those guys, you maybe got up a little bit more for those games. But ultimately, I always had a lot of respect for everybody that was in that position, because I knew how difficult it was and how hard those guys had worked. So to me, Darren Pang was, you'll never see that again, unfortunately, because there's guys out there his size that are really competitive and talented. But as the game has moved to the direction it has, it's really hard for a guy that size to play.
I wanted to kind of move fast forward a little bit ahead in your career, Sean, and ask you mentioned him before, but a little bit more about Benoit Allaire, because you'd already had a really good career before you arrived in Phoenix, in Arizona. But it looked like there was almost is it fair to say, almost like a second stage to your career after hooking up with Benoit in Arizona and then Philadelphia and Tampa Bay? Like, I don't want to say rejuvenation. I don't want to use the wrong word here, but you jump back into the forefront of NHL goaltending after working with him. What changed there?
Well, first of all, you're being too kind. I was terrible before I got to Arizona for a few years, and I had lost my understanding of the game. I really don't know what I was doing out there. I drive home after some games in Florida. The year I was in Florida, I drive home after some games wondering how I even was able to win a hockey game, because I had no idea what I was doing. I had lost, the understanding of the way the position was played. And
so you're not just, Sean, you're not talking confidence here. You're just talking like overall, you lost the feel for the game.
Well, it goes hand in hand. The confidence is something that, you can fool yourself sometimes. You can mentally get up for games and, as I said, go out and compete and manufacture some things. But ultimately, you still have to play the game. You have to understand the game. You have to read the play. You have to technically do some things right. And in those couple of years leading up to going on to Arizona, I had lost really my understanding of what I was trying to do out there. So I got away with it some nights. I was still young enough that I felt good. I was in shape, all those things. But I needed a real retooling. And when I got to Arizona, it was such a breath of fresh air to just sit down with Benoit and have him sort of make me recognize that I wasn't as far off as I thought I was. I just needed to work on some things more consistently, and I needed to understand the game a little differently, because the game was changing, and it's always changing. And I was at that stage where I was still trying to play the way I was when I was 21, and I wasn't going to get away with it anymore. So I give Benoit all the credit, really, for me being able to play not only another 10 years in the league after I got to Arizona, but to have probably 5 of the best and most consistent years I had in my career.
So what did you guys change in your game?
Well, first of all, what I changed right off the bat was I positionally, recognized that with my size and the way the game was going and how quick it was becoming, I needed to step back a little bit. I needed to not work necessarily as hard, not have as much movement in my game, not be as aggressive at times. and to really just let the play come to me. I was always a guy that understood the game, from a mental standpoint where I read the play. I watched a lot of hockey. I played a lot when I was younger, ball hockey, street hockey. I really had a good feel for the game, but I was overworking and I was trying to chase the game all the time. And Benoit just sort of got me to think about, letting the play come to me. At the end of the day, the one thing that's never changed about goaltending and never will is the puck's got to come through you to get into the net. And if you're in position, that's as simple as it really gets, is that it's got to come through you. So you can't chase it. You can't go looking to get out there and grab the puck. It's going to end up coming right to you at some point. And so I started to look at that side of the game a lot differently.
Did that influence how you coach too? I mean, as you moved on from your playing career, and as you said, we're working in management, but also doing some goalie coaching. Did that sort of become part of your philosophy in Arizona as on the goalie coaching side of things?
Absolutely. I plagiarized everything. I took everything. I took everything that I learned from Benoit on a technical side of the game, and I put it into my own coaching. I combined what I think that was something that was unique to me was my experiences playing, the mental side of the way I looked at the game, the conditioning side, what I felt a goaltender could be to his team in a leadership role. Those were all things that I added into the way I coached with Brizgalov and Mike Smith and Devin Dubnyk and those guys. But ultimately, at the end of the day, those are all very talented players that needed sort of what I did. They just needed a little retooling. They needed an understanding of some of the things to maybe work on more consistently. And then they're off and running. And every one of those guys has gone on to play extremely well at times. And they do it themselves at the end of the day. You got to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to change at times. But it sometimes takes somebody else to point that out to you. And so I was lucky with Benoit, but I also wanted to be able to pass that on to other guys when I got in the position.
The one line I always hear from Benoit goalies is beat the pass, question, answer. And I remember, or beat the pass, solve the equation. I remember Dubnyk talking about, how you basically helped change his entire career around with, one of the simple philosophies was if I can beat that pass on my skates, I'm at the right depth. If I can't, I maybe have a little too much ice. How much, as you talk about that, is little tidbits like that, but how much as a goalie coach is the technical side like that and the confidence side? How much of it is a sports psychologist versus a technical goalie coach? Is it an equal mix, or it just seems there's a lot of sports psychologists for most goalie coaches these days?
Yeah, and I think it depends on the individual. I mean, everybody's different to a degree. You have guys that need more massaging, should I say, guys that are a little more fragile at times. But ultimately, anybody that gets to this level is not only a good player; they're mentally tough. Sometimes that can be eroded away. Confidence at that position is very fleeting at times. There's lots of things you could do from a coaching standpoint to hurt your goalie's confidence. It's always been something that I've been frustrated at the NHL level is sometimes the lack of understanding from head coaches about the position of goaltending. It really is not that complicated. At the end of the day, a goaltender and his mental stability and his confidence is not any different than any other position. And if you're going to get yanked every time you give up a bad goal, if you're going to get sat out after you've had a bad game, those things are things that are going to hurt your confidence. Now, you have to deal with it, and some guys are better at it than others, and some guys can overcome that stuff, but not everybody handles it the same way. And I think as a coach, and I'm saying goalie coach, your biggest job is to find a way to keep your players confident all the time. Because if you're confident, you're going to play well. And doesn't mean you're going to win, and team's going to go on and win every night, but you're going to play much better when you're confident. That's just as simple as it is.
Did you play better when you had a partner that you got along really, really well with, as opposed to that you were competing with and had more of a competition relationship with?
I never had any problem getting along with my partners, no matter who they were. I mean, I looked at it again as a respect factor. The guy that was sitting beside me, he had the same goals as I did. He wanted to play. He wanted to be a factor. He wanted to be the number one guy for the most part. I was lucky. There was a time in my career when I had what you would call, backup goalies that were comfortable as the backup. And I played well in that circumstance. At that stage, I can remember in Hartford, I had Jason Muzzatti, I had Jeff Reese. I had guys that were good goaltenders, but they accepted they were a backup. And so that puts, the pressure on me to be a guy that went out every night, and I knew the team was counting on me. So I thrived on that at times. But there was also times I was in situations where I hadn't earned the confidence of the coach or the organization to just be a guy they were going to give the ball to. And so I had to compete for my ice time. But I also always respected the other guy because I knew he was going through the same thing. So for me, that's the team side of the game. Is there are points where you recognize, hey, you're in a team sport here, and you may not be individually getting what you want out of the game right now, but you have to find a way to contribute to your team. That's a big part of the role.
With all that experience and all that knowledge built in, how hard was it to go from being the goalie coach, management, having touched all these bases and having that understanding of the position for those aspects, to being a goalie dad?
Oh, the worst. The worst. I mean, I don't wish that on anybody. And I say that jokingly, but not really. I mean, it's not a position that as a parent is a lot of fun to watch sometimes. And the reason for me, we're all the same with our kids. We want our kids to be successful. We want the best for them. I'm lucky that my oldest, Brendan, he has the same sort of attitude about the game that I always have. He goes out and works hard and gives it his best, and sometimes you just have to, let the chips fall. But as a parent, I never really enjoy watching, Brendan play from a standpoint that it's his journey, and he's gonna, I'm gonna help him when I can, and he's gonna find his own way in the game, and he has. But you just can't relax as a parent. You just, at that position, you don't relax. And so I often thought back to all those years when my family was watching, and I really had a different perspective on it once I started to be a parent. And I probably should have wrote apology letters to everybody in my family for having to go through that all those years.
So any chance little Hudson, who's 4, gets to play goal?
Well, I'm going to destroy the VCR tapes so that he never can see them. But the short answer to that is, down here in Arizona, there's a lot of other sports that he'll be attracted to, I hope. And of course, there's not a better game than hockey, in my opinion. And I think that it's the ultimate team sport. But if there's something else that he has more interest in than playing goal, I'm not going to dissuade him from doing that. I'll tell you that.
Like music?
I was just going to say, last one's a fun one for me, Sean. We've talked about guitars, and we've written stories about how guitars can help with the glove hand, but how do they help with team building and leadership? And maybe you can share a couple of stories, because if I remember correctly, you used to take it on the road, world championships, playing with Team Canada, and informal jam sessions with new teammates. How good a bonding exercise can that be?
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's like anything. You have to, in this sport and in any sport, you have to find ways away from the game to relax, to challenge yourself. I was never from a musical family, so playing guitar for me was probably like it is for most kids, and especially of that generation, where you thought of a guitar as something that was cool. you thought girls would probably like it. So you grabbed one thinking that if I could ever learn to play this, I'd probably be a pretty cool guy. I learned later on that it had nothing to do with being cool, because that sure didn't help me. But what it did do was it gave me something to really work at that I wasn't naturally good at, and it also it did open up the communication path a lot of times when you had one on the road. You didn't know your teammates as well as you'd like to. You got in a room, you grabbed a couple beers with your guys, you played a few tunes. So to me, it's a great bonding thing. And in sports, especially hockey, where our game is so intense, and at the end of the day, we rely on our teammates so much. Anything you can do to get to know your teammates better and become closer is going to make you a better team. So I'm a big fan of music. And anybody that can learn to play the guitar, I tell you, it's great in so many ways.
Did you take requests back then? And what are some of the best? Like you've had a chance to play with some pretty big names over the years. Are there any that jump out?
Yeah, I got to play with Garth Brooks, and I mean, for a guy that I'm not per se a country guy. At the end of the day, I love old country. Of course, Garth Brooks is an incredible entertainer, musician, songwriter, and what an honor for somebody like me to be able to get up on stage with him and play. And I've got the guitar that he gave me sitting on my wall here, and I obviously cherish it. But that's the sort of experience that has resulted from hockey. And to be honest, everything that anybody who's played this game for a long time has is a result of hockey. And so that to me is still the way I look at everything. Is that I've been very fortunate. I was so lucky to play a long time, and it afforded me some other experiences in life that I never would have got. So I don't take them for granted, but I also know that if I was to, walk out the door tomorrow and try to make a living as a musician, you'd see me on the street panning for my next meal, because I'm not gonna ever make a living doing anything like that.
Well, I'm on the same journey much earlier than you, and that damn F chord. If I could never get that thing clean, I'll be the happiest guy in the world.
So,
yeah, well, that's there are some challenges, and the dexterity and all those other things again can't hurt you in anything you do. But the one thing I learned, and again it goes back to the playing of hockey, is everything it takes time and it takes practice, but it's also you got to practice the right things. And for me, guitar playing was never natural. It was not something that I picked up and thought, oh boy, this is easy. But you learn things from different people along the way. Like goalie coaches, you find a guy that teaches you a few little things here and there, and it's a lot of fun when you actually sit down. You realize, okay, I can play this. I actually understand this a little bit. So a challenge, no doubt, but one that I'll keep doing the rest of my life. I can't play hockey the rest of my life, but I can play guitar the rest of my life.
In the spirit of music and Garth Brooks, you got a tune-up from Benoit Allaire. Now, after this conversation with Woody and I, you can say you've got friends in low places, and we also enjoyed this dance with you.
I can't even think of anything to come back with there. That was pretty darn good. That was a great segue into the end of this. So I appreciate it, guys. Anytime, and you do a great job, and I've been glad to be a guest with you guys.
Thanks, Berkey.
Okay, guys, we'll talk again.
Sean's work as general manager of Canada's bronze medal-winning men's Olympic hockey team at the most recent Olympic Winter Games was another step towards a GM position with an NHL club. I really like his approach. The way he says he jumps on the ice with the goaltenders, even though he's not a full-time goalie coach anymore. He still has that knowledge to pass on, so why not contribute? Too many times, coaches or managers get separated and slotted into specific categories, distancing themselves from their specialty. Burke is a great example that people should and can still chip in. Chris Pronger does much the same thing with the Florida Panthers. Kevin Woodley also plays that role around InGoal. He bounces from the interview setting with Sean to hitting up Source for Sports in Surrey, the Hockey Shop, and thehockeyshop.com for our InGoal Radio gear segment. The light says he's ready to rock, so it's go time for the gear. Woody?
Welcome back to the basement of the Hockey Shop, or as I like to call it, a little slice of goalie heaven. Hockey Shop source for sports and thehockeyshop.com. We're here with Cam for our weekly gear segment. And before we get into it, we're going to talk about the Bauer 2X. May 17th is a launch date, so a couple days after this podcast launches for the entire line. We've been working on the 2X Pro, pads, gloves, blocker, but we want to talk about the next price point down today, the Bauer 2X. There's some really exciting things there. But before we get there, I understand you actually had a visitor. Guy came all the way, or was in from Calgary, came all the way out here just to say hi because he listened to you on the podcast, and you didn't get his name to give him a shout out?
You know what? I feel bad, but we're going to count this as the shout out anyway. Came in, huge fan of the podcast, heard the guys, found out me, myself, and chatted about gear for the next half an hour. It was definitely a bit of a humbling experience, even though, it's gotten so big.
Yeah, another size
What's
up
the
on the
for
helmet.
That? Yeah,
Ego? I think it's
Ego was the one. Yeah,
Ego.
yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to pump it up a little more, and we're also going to pump up the Bauer 2X line here. Again, on the website, May 17th, you will see our overview, kind of our first look in depth. We've had it on the ice with the 2X Pro line, but we want to expand this. We know that not everybody is buying the Pro product. We know that some of you are buying the next line down, especially if you're younger or even beer leagues. And there's been some really positive developments. We talked about it already when we did the CCM eFlex 4, the 4.9 as well as the Pro. We've already talked about the Bauer 2X Pro. Let's do their next price point. And it's just simply the 2X. Some features carry over from that top end down to this second price point. Walk us through them.
Definitely looking at the pad in particular to start out with, and again with those features that are coming down, it's quite important to talk about here. Even picking up the pad, looking at it as its face, it's really hard at the naked eye to start to tell the difference between that and what would be the 2X Pro. For starters, so the front face won't have that same Core-Tech that you'll find on the 2X Pro. That said, it's a synthetic leather going out through the front face of the pad. Moving on to the slide surface, this is now where we find a similarity to the 2X Pro. It is their Core-Tech ST material on both the knee wing and the calf wing. It's going to create that nice slide surface. It's a nice hard surface to, again, help increase that slide back and forth.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things. Obviously, we can't assume that everybody's followed along as we've covered this pad from 1S through 1X, 2S, and now 2X. But that's the material that Bauer, kind of the innovative material that they came up with, basically changed the way they built pads with that Core-Tech ST. So it's not on the face of this pad, but it is on your primary points of contact on the inside edge, and that's the knee and underneath the calf. And that's what creates that sliding. Like, we've seen it. There's a noticeable difference there. So to be able, and we've talked to NHL guys about it, about how much better that material slides. Largely, it's a hard surface on the inside edge, and you get that. So you're going to get that sort of that pro level sliding of the 2X Pro in the 2X line. You're also going to get, again, not the same material on the surface, but it sounds like they've put some carbon in there as well to, again, maybe not quite the same level of active rebounds, but a more active rebound than they'd have without it, the curved composite.
Yeah, so this, to me, is probably one of the more exciting upgrades that's been brought to the line, which we'll allude to a little bit later. CurveX composite, so something that you've, again, normally only found in their pro-level series, whether it be the 1S, 2S, 1X, now what will be 2X. Structure for the pad, a little bit on the rebound qualities as well. Huge upgrade, especially for longevity of the pad in terms of it breaking down and whatnot, getting too soft, and again consistently popping out those rebounds a little bit harder, but even in the mid-range level pad now.
Yeah, and so that's we talk about overall the 2X line, 2X Pro, and this 2X pad designed to be more flexible. Like we would normally associate with a quote-unquote softer pad. So the boot break has more flex to it. It's got a little more give, through the thigh rise. It's a little more flexible there. But again, without sacrificing the innovative stuff. A lot of times when we think of a softer pad, we think of softer rebounds. We think of, not having that sort of... It's basically a modern pad with a more traditional feel. And they've continued that in terms of the intention of the 2X line as well as the 2X Pro.
Correct. Moving down to the boot of the pad. So we have that same 100-degree free flex boot that you'd once again find on the 2X Pro.
So a bit of a flatter break, not as steep as the 2S.
That's correct, yeah. So it's sit a little bit flatter on your skate, and again, a little bit more flexible there too as well. So again, some of the differences. Also, we have the same elastic toe ties that we'll find on the 2X Pro. Again, to give you that flexibility, we have that video up on our Instagram, I believe, and also InGoal's Instagram as well, of the pad actually sliding and how it rotates and snaps back. So your biggest benefits for your elastic toe ties, you can visually see it with that example.
Yeah, pad really, as you get back up out of the butterfly, the elasticity helps sort of pull it back to the center of your skate as you get up to your stance automatically. But as we said, when you're down on the ice, that the elasticity allows that skate to get to the ice. A little bit of tension there, but almost like acting like a toe tie in terms of giving you some slack that you can get the skate to the ice for a push and to make it easier on your joints, but without the sloppiness of a toe tie. It's more responsive as you get back up.
Exactly. And just a couple more features to quickly call out. Things that, again, you'll find on the top price point in the 2X, but also here. Again, I wouldn't say redesigned, but slightly modded calf cradle with the elastic extensions at the bottom of the boot, allowing it to flex a little bit more. Overall, the inside material still features the Quattro material that you once again had on the 2X, a nice little upgrade there, and the adjustable knee wing as well that you would find on the Pro Pad.
Yeah, and removable too this year, like not just adjustable, but removable. Nice feature as we're testing it because we got guys that want it, guys that don't want it. We can pop it in and out, back and forth. I will say too, the Tune Fit strapping system on this is our first experience with it in the 2X Pro, and it continues in the 2X. Lot of response so far. I mean, this is a pad, again, designed to be more flexible, designed to be worn tight, but you really have the ability with that Tune Fit system to kind of adjust just how tight, how connected you feel through the shin into the top of the boot, how your leg moves with or the pad moves around your leg. Been really impressed with that, actually. And I kind of understand now why even some guys like, say, a Devin Dubnyk have, that leg channel on a 2S pad. So there's some real positives there, and it's nice to see that it continues. It's not just for the Pro Pad. It continues down to the next price point. We speak about price point. What are we looking at here for a difference between a 2X pad versus a 2X Pro? Like, just how much are people saving on this?
So for 2X Pro, we're looking at that $19.99 price point, so basically $2,000. Here, we're half that. We're looking at $9.99. There is a little bit more to that I will allude to after we cover the glove and blocker as well. There is a custom element to this.
I almost forgot. Well, I think we should talk about that now. So you can
let the cat
actually
out of the bag on this.
I did. Well, we don't want to, you don't want to leave them hanging too long. We could have teased it, I guess. But when we talk about Pro Pads and all the features, we see them carried down to this line. But the one that might be the most exciting is you can actually get a custom 2X pad. So a lower price point, half the price, but still some custom options. What can you get custom at this level?
So what Bauer offers, you're going to be able to do custom colors, pick your size, and also add your name. The color zone's a little bit more limited than what you would find on the 2X Pro. I believe it's only 3 zones off the top of my head. That said, you get those colors, you get your name on it, you're getting all those features of that kind of Pro Pad, especially for that mid-range price point. Now, it is a touch more. I don't have that off the top of my head, but you can contact me here at the hockey shop to find out exactly. 604 589.
Look at this. He doesn't even need
8299.
Say it again.
604 589 8299.
And of course, thehockeyshop.com. You can contact them through that as well. Okay, so custom colors in a second price point pad. Your name on the pad, like I'm sorry, I don't care. Ours all say InGoal magazine when they send the samples, but that's always been one of the cool parts of being a goalie. It's not just the custom gear. It's having your name on a set of pads, and the fact they're offering that without having to be at the full pro range and the full pro price point. That's kind of cool. I like it. I'm like it. Like there's a little golf clap over here for the Bauer crew. Nice.
There's a genuine smile across the table here. I can see it.
Yeah. Not to nerd out too much, but yeah, I'm kind of geeked on that one. And the other thing I should say, we will have one with an InGoal magazine embroidery on it because we're going to test 2X and 2X gloves. We're going to test that at a major bantam level for an entire year. We'll do a full review on it, and then we'll keep you up to date. So let people know, just testing the durability factor, testing how it compares to a Pro Pad when it gets in regular skates at a high level. I think it's a misconception sometimes with that lower price point that, this is a cheaper pad and it's for kids that aren't good. So we want to put it to a really good test with a really high-end young goaltender, and I'm looking forward. Thank Bauer for that, and looking forward to sort of sharing that feedback with everyone as we get this kid into it. So let's move on to the gloves and the blocker real quick. First thing I noticed about the Vapor 2X glove compared to the Vapor 2X Pro is how well and easily they both close out of the box. It's like flippy flap, no problem. Even when you have weak little soft hands like me, you can still open and close this thing like butter. That's pretty impressive.
So, I mean, to even highlight once again that flippy flap as you refer to it,
it's a real technical term. I like to bring the deep analytical, scientific based terminology to this podcast.
So, I mean, to dive into that a little bit deeper, Bauer really set themselves out to have that excellent closure right out of the box for, to be all 3 price points at Trappers, which we can get into a little bit later. That said, this glove, once again, it doesn't share as many similarities as it would differences to the X900 of last year. We're similar 60-degree angle that you're going to find on the 2X Pro. One of the bigger upgrades that you would find on this glove in comparison to things that we would have seen last year would be the CurveX composite again. I know we talked about that a bit in the pad, but with the addition of the glove, it provides structure and also a bit of a protection standpoint too for it. Fantastic upgrade once again for a mid-range level glove.
Well, especially from a durability and structure, that's going to help the glove keep its shape for longer.
Exactly. Not the same outer skin material as you would find in the 2X Pro. Again, similar story to what's going on in the lake pad. It's there. Other than that, I mean, this glove just feels great. I mean, I have it on my hand right now. I'm sitting there opening and closing it, and I'm really having no effort at all.
Yeah, he's got little baby girl man hands like me too. So it's the fact he's able to do that is really, really quite impressive. His head's growing, but his muscles haven't. I will say that, we talk about a 60-degree closure. We try and compare, not to compare to other brands, but just because people come from other brands. I really like the Bauer 2S glove as more of, it was more like kind of like a Vaughn 5500 or a CCM 600, that sort of first baseman's mitt, fingertip to the end of the thumb closure. I thought that was the best glove Bauer had made personally. Used it for more than a year and really loved it. This one, the feedback early on it is fantastic, but different break. So 60 degree, a little more comparable to say, if we're talking CCM, a 590, or what would be the comparable in a Vaughn?
Vaughn has their XP model, which would be, again, we're all finding, or we can all group it into that 590 break kind of style.
I give CCM credit here. They've created a vernacular that's consistent among their different glove lines. So that's why we make the comparison. We're not comparing the glove to it. It's just that some people have used that brand, and so they'll know. So this is more like a 590, 60-degree break. Nice clean break right down the line and through the pocket. It doesn't change angles as you get into the pocket. A little bit of a flatter surface on the hand. It doesn't curve in deep at the thumb, but a really nice, big, generous pocket. And I think what we've had on the tester feedback so far is just presents nice, like as easily as it closes. I sometimes find gloves that close easily out of the box, they come closed and they don't want to present open, and you have to work to break it in that way. This thing presents wide open and still closes easily. So stick tap to the boys at Bauer for coming up with this model.
Exactly. Minimal effort to have that open presentation.
And I am all about minimal effort. Let's go to the blocker.
All right. So blocker, again, we can talk about similar stories that we've already kind of mentioned with the catch glove and the leg pads. So not the same front mace material, not the
Gore-Tex ST, but we've got a synthetic leather on there. Similar look, sort of the diamond shaped dimpling on part of the pad, but again, not using the same materials.
Exactly. But once again, as we've called out before, the addition of CurveX composite. Now, Bauer blockers have become almost famous. They've come a long way. I actually remember, and this one feels similar to it. The line itself wasn't a home run, but I remember way back to the Reactor 6000 when we first tested that with blocker, and that blocker to me was a home run, and they've kind of continued and enhanced some of the sort of feel and trends of that blocker right into their different lines, and it looks like they've done it here again with the 2X. What would the key differences be between a 2X Vapor blocker and a 2X Pro?
beyond the material?
It basically is that material. I mean, the rebound qualities between the two are going to come out very similar. Obviously, the Core Tech on the front face, the 2X Pro, is going to help it give it that little bit more. But that CurveX composite also helps with that rebound quality, and finding that in the mid-range blocker, you're going to be sending those pucks flying.
Yeah, it's funny. We haven't talked about that much. We've talked a lot about the pads and just how active pucks are off the pads on the Bauer line. And I mean, hey, Linus Ullmark of the Buffalo Sabres say that's why he switched to the Bauer pad. There is value in that hot rebound. You get that off the blocker too. In the 2X Pro, and it sounds like maybe not quite the same in 2X, but still with the CurveX composite, it's still a hot rebound. And again, that's the difference between leaving one somebody can get to and being able to direct it past them with enough velocity that they can't. Sometimes that's the difference between pulling it out of the back of your net or not.
Which you do a lot.
Well, I kind of deserve that, and also it's kind of true. All right, Cam. Do we want to walk quickly? Because we've been talking a long time about this 2X line. And we got Sean Burke on today, and he was 50 minutes of beautiful talk about goaltending. Do we want to go through the lower price points? We saved that one for another day.
I think we'll save that one for another day.
Perfect. So this is the second price point from Bauer. It will be in store at the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports in Surrey, online at thehockeyshop.com on May 17th. We'll have a full review of the 2X Pro line, but like I said, not everyone needs the Pro, and there are some really great features here in the 2X line. We'll have a look at that at InGoal Mag in the near future. But in the meantime, if you got any questions, make sure you come down and see Cam or check them out at the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports. Another excellent week here in goalie heaven in the basement. Cam, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll be heading out to the gym now.
Got to work on those arms.
Look at your counter or your clock or whatever you do to keep track of things. But you can tell we went long in the interview today. So what we're going to do is hold off on the listener questions for this episode 17. My hope is to double up next week. So please send us your thoughts and your questions to podcast@ingoalmag.com. Podcast@ingoalmag.com. I can't do it quite as well as our good man, David Hutchison, but the information is the same. Plus, don't forget, if you're in BC's Lower Mainland at the end of the month, Sunday, May 26th, come out to Burnaby 8 Rinks for the Source for Sports, the Hockey Shop 2019 Tendy Fest. Woody, Hutch, and I will be recording a live podcast. You can browse all the latest lines of gear and check out the very latest from all the manufacturers. The information available at thehockeyshop.com. And by the way, check out ingoalmag.com. I'm looking at it right now, and it's a great resource. Carey Price is on the cover at this point, the homepage. We also have the gear segment, CCM E-Flex 4 gloves, and it's got all the brakes, the 90, the 60, the 50. It's the 600, the 590, and the 580. It's really cool. There's some unboxing of the gear as well, and that excitement that you get to share with our good friend Matty, who unboxed his latest set of CCM gear. On behalf of Hutch and Woody, our thanks to Sean and Cam for their time this week. I'm Darren Millard, sending a big stick tap to you right there, for listening and supporting the world's leader in goaltending. We love this project, it's a passion, and we're happy to have you along for the ride. Until next time, don't hesitate. Make your decision and go. For those who pause and think about it, end up watching the puck dropped at center ice. I'm talking about that race for the puck. So go get it, goalies.